Verbal and nonverbal communication. This module deals with the communication as a transfer of meaning from one person or group to another. It focuses on the nature of meaning and ways to maintain the integrity of meaning through the process of dissemination and reception of a message. This unit also provides an overview of the nature and elements of verbal and nonverbal communication. Linguistics. Linguistics is the scientific study of language, specifically its structure, development, and relationship with other languages. Linguistics draws on both the physical and the social science and is subdivided into several recognized categories. Historical linguistics studies the origins, development, and relationships of various languages. Field linguistics. This is an applied area that collects data on little studied languages, particularly those with few speakers that are in danger of dying out. Phonology or linguistic phonetics is the study of the spoken language, particularly in its physical aspects of speech sounds. Specifically, it is the study of phonemes, the basic sound structure of a language, and is concerned with how speech changes over time and how one language differs from another. Phonology deals with how sounds function within a language, whereas a related field, phonetics, deals with the human vocalization of sounds. Morphology, meanwhile, focuses on morphemes, the basic unit of meaning within a language. This branch of linguistics deals with how sounds combine to form words and or change the meaning of words. Semantics. This deals with the meaning of language. It is a branch of linguistics that deals with the way signs relate to things, specifically with the meaning of words, phrases, and expressions. Semantics also deals with aspects of denotation and connotation. Syntax or syntactics focuses on the form of language, its rules and patterns. Syntax deals with how signs relate to other signs, specifically the pattern and flow of words as they intermingle in phrases and sentences. This is the branch of language study that involves rules of grammar and other prescriptive and descriptive patterns. Pragmatics. This is about the impact of language and how people use it. This branch of linguistics deals with how signs impact on how behavior and the social rules, often informal, that govern how language is used in different contexts and environments. Social linguistics. This is a study of how language is used in society, including its differences among cultures, age groups, genders, social class, and so on. Neurolinguistics or clinical linguistics. This is the clinical field of study that deals with language disorders called aphasia. It also deals with how to prevent and overcome such disorders. Computational linguistics. This is a new era that includes automatic speech recognition, computer-assisted translation, and other uses associated with the use of computers to predict and interpret human communication. It also overlaps with both historical and field linguistics. Verbal communication. All forms of communication can be categorized as either verbal or nonverbal. In turn, both verbal and nonverbal communication can be subdivided into either vocal or non-vocal. Much of the communication that takes place between people is verbal. That is, it is based on language. Verbal communication of the vocal category includes spoken language. Non-vocal verbal communication then involves written communication as well as communication that is transmitted through transmitted sign language, finger spelling, braille, or other similar alternatives to verbal language. Communication has been called the transfer of meaning from one mind to another. Communication is a sharing of meaning through the transmission of information via mutually understood signs. Because meanings exist in the human mind, they cannot be shared or communicated except through some external vehicle. The human body is capable of making sounds and movements, which in turn can create a system of vehicles for sharing inner meanings and ideas with others. In general terms, such elements that codify meaning are called signs. The study of such signs is called semiotics. Semiotics. Semiotics, sometimes called semiosis or semiology, Theory or study of signs, specifically the theoretical relationship between language and signs or symbols used in the transmission of language. This is an application of linguistic principles to objects other than natural language, such as facial expression or religious ritual. This is academic study focusing on both the signification of language, assigning and deriving meaning from signs, as well as its codification, attachment of rules, and procedures for correct use. The foundation of human communication is speech, a natural capability but one that requires learning in a cultural context to make it mutually understandable with others. During the course of human social interaction, people have found it useful to add to their inventory or vehicles to communicate. Particularly, they have tried to extend the possibility of communication beyond the limits of speech, which is restricted to words uttered and heard in the here and now, that is, with the hearer and listener in the same place at the same time. The way to communicate beyond speech is to communicate through signs. Signs. Signs are nonverbal units of expression. A natural sign is a physical indicator, such as a smoke as an indication of the presence of fire. Signs also are called signals or cues. Semiotics identifies three types of signs: symbols, indices, and icons. A symbol stands in place of an object. It may be a physical object such as a flag standing for patriotism and national pride, a cross with strong religious meaning for Christians, even the Nike swoosh or the McDonald's arches. Or it may be a word or phrase such as the Allahu Akbar, printed in Arabic on flags or headbands. Symbols often have a metaphorical quality, such as the symbol of water, as a sign of life or purity, as in the ritual washing in religious ceremonies. Likewise, people sometimes serve as symbolic signs, such as Adolf Hitler being considered as a face of hatred, Mother Teresa as a face of compassion, or Nelson Mandela or Malcolm X as faces of human struggle for dignity. An index points to something beyond itself. It is an indicator such as words like big and arrows. An index also is sometimes called a natural sign because the relationship between the word and what it signifies is natural, such as a smoke being an indexical sign of fire. An icon is a representation of an object that produces a mental image of the object represented. For example, the word tree, arbre, and key evoke a mental image only if you understand English, French, and Japanese respectively. But the picture of a tree conjures up tree in the brain regardless of language ability. For this reason, icons often are used by computers and by the transportation and travel industry where customers with many different language backgrounds can nevertheless understand restroom icons. Nonverbal communication. While verbal communication is much studied and is the focus of much applied attention in areas ranging from journalism to governance to entertainment, the fact is that human beings communicate more through nonverbal means. Some estimates are that so-called body language accounts for 65, 70, even 90% of human communication. Using the 70% figure for body language, the voice accounts for another 20% or so, and specific words only about 10%. Research conclusions may vary a bit, but the consensus is clear. Nonverbal communication is hugely important in human interaction. Nonverbal communication is bound to culture. In particular, there are differences among cultures and nationalities about the relative value of speech versus silence, the relative value of talk versus action, the social role of small talk or gossip, and the role of animation, rhyme, and exaggeration in speech. Because of these differences, the study of verbal and nonverbal communication always must be done within a social or cultural context. Nonverbal communication may be vocal, focusing on vocal characteristics such as pitch, rate, and so on, or non-vocal, focusing on body language, environment, attire, and the like. Some linguists identify an aspect of nonverbal communication called paralanguage. This refers to a range of non-linguistic elements of speech such as facial expressions, gestures, the use of time and space, and so on. However, most linguists adhere to stricter categorization, commonly the study of nonverbal communication. that is divided into several specific categories. Kinesics, simplistically called body language, deals with physical movement, sometimes called affective displays. This study applies traditional linguistic principles to the body as a whole or to specific parts, particularly the face, hands, and arms. It also deals with posture in standing and sitting, as well as with eye and facial expressions, such as the arcing of eyebrows or rolling of the eyes. Kinesics vary culturally. For example, a person of Mediterranean culture may use extensive hand movements and body gestures as an expression of anger, whereas a Japanese person may be apparently less excited, but perhaps no less angry. Kinesics also includes the use of smiling, frowning, giggling, and so on, which also differs by culture. While universally, smiling reveals happiness, in some cultures, it also is used to mask sadness or to hide embarrassment. Kinesics generally refers not to sign language that relies on gestures and expressions in a grammatical context as an alternative to spoken language, but it is associated with the use of emblems, physical gestures that support or reinforce what is said verbally. Some emblems seem to be universal, while others are cultural, with different interpretations in various cultures or perhaps with different uses by men and women. An example of a universal emblem is the uplifted shoulders and upturned hands that indicate, "I don't know," virtually everywhere in the world. An example of a culture-bound emblem is the encircled thumb and forefinger. That gestures can be interpreted as worthless in France, money in Japan, okay in the United States, a curse in Arab cultures, and obscenity in Germany, Brazil, and Australia. Oculesics. This is closely related to kinesics. Oculesics deals with eye behavior as an element of communication. Some aspects of oculesics deals with a static or fixed gaze versus dynamic eye movement. This so-called eye contact is the subject of much interpretation by the observer, making it difficult to predict its exact communication impact. In the West, direct eye contact, looking into the eyes of the other person, is common about 40% of the time while talking and 70% while listening. In Japan, it is more common to look at the throat of the other person. In China and Indonesia, the practice is to lower the eyes because direct eye contact is considered bad manners. And in Hispanic culture, direct eye contact is a form of challenge and disrespect. In Arab culture, it is common for both speakers and listeners to look directly into each other's eyes for long periods of time, indicating keen interest in the conversation. In Mediterranean society, men often look at women for long periods of time that may be interpreted as staring by women from other cultures. Even the same kinetic gestures can be interpreted differently. For example, the facial gestures of downcast eyes during conversation can suggest social difference, evasion, insincerity, or boredom. Proxemics. This involves the social use of space in a communication situation. One aspect of this is the closeness between and among people when they speak, and the significant role that culture plays in this. Distance is generally described on a continuum from intimate space, 0 to 18 inches, to personal space or informal distance, 18 inches to 4 feet, to social space, or formal distance, 4 to 12 feet, and public space or distance beyond 12 feet. Proxemics also deals with the effective use of space in social settings, such as businesses and homes, ranging in the arrangement of space to encourage or inhibit communication. Haptics. This focuses on touching as an element of communication, indicating both the type of touch as well as its frequency and intensity. Like many other elements of nonverbal communication, haptics is very much a function of culture. It has been noted, for example, that Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Latin American cultures employ much social touching in conversation, including embraces and hand-holding. These are called high contact or high touch cultures. In moderate touch cultures such as North America and Northern Europe, touching is used only occasionally, such as in handshakes and sporadic shoulder touching or backslapping. In low contact cultures such as in Northern Asia cultures, Meanwhile, social touching is rarely used at all. But the geography is by no means that simple. People in the Asian nation of the Philippines, for example, use a large amount of social touching in conversation and personal interaction. Even within a culture, haptics vary. For example, handshakes vary in length and strength of grip depending on the actual or hoped for degree of intimacy between the two people shaking hands. Vocalics, this is also called paralanguage, deals with vocal cues, more accurately referred to as the non-phonemic qualities of language. These include accent, loudness, tempo, pitch, cadence, rate of speech, nasality, and tone, insofar as these convey meaning. Vocalics is sometimes subdivided into several categories. Vocal characterizers include laughing, crying, yawning, and so on. These can be associated with culture, such as the different ways various cultures accept the practice of belching. Vocal qualifiers such as volume, pitch, rhythm, and tempo also are associated with cultural distinctions. In Arab culture, for example, speaking loudly connotes sincerity, whereas in North America, it often is interpreted as aggressive. Vocals segregate sounds such as likewise also differ among various cultures. Vocal weight deals with the speed at which people talk, another factor that offers various interpretations. Chronemics. This deals with the use of time as an element of communication. Formal time is measured in minutes, hours, days, and so on. Informal time is measured relative to seasons, social customs, lunar cycles, etc. Chronemics involves specifics such as punctuality, which can be monochronic or M time, and polychronic or P time, along with patterns of dominance or difference within a communication situations. For example, studies show that men are more likely than women to dominate a conversation and interrupt another speaker. Chronemics also deals with time from the standpoint of social settings, such as the likelihood among Americans of arriving early for business meetings, but being fashionably late for social activities. While in Latin America and Arab culture, business people often arrive at a time. Westerns would consider late, taking business meetings as occasions for hospitality and socializing. Meanwhile, the Sayok's language doesn't even have a word for late, reflecting a very relaxed attitude toward time. Chronemics also considers the use of monochronemics, doing one thing at a time, emphasis on schedules and promptness, getting to the point quickly, versus polychronemics, doing several things at a time, emphasis on people and the whole of a relationship. Studies show that the monochronemic conversation, talking about one thing at a time, is common in Northern Europe and North America. Meanwhile, Latin American, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean cultures are more likely to use polychronemic conversation. This is multiple conversations at the same time and frequent interruption by other speaker listeners. Appearance. This deals with the communication role played by a person's look or physical appearance, as compared with physical gestures associated with kinesics. It deals with physical aspects of body shape, hair color, and skin tone, as well as grooming, dress, both clothing and jewelry, and use of appearance enhancement such as body piercings, brandings, and tattoos. Consider, for example, how attire is an essential part of non-vocal communication among areas influenced by Arab culture. Among North and Western Africans, public speakers prefer long robes and big sleeves so that when they raise their hands, extra sleeve clothes slips through the arms and pops up their shoulder, making them look bigger and more elegant. The Arab and North African head covering with different bands of clothes and the color of the robes, white in daytime, dark at night, are more than fashion statements. Environment. This involves the communicative value of the physical space, such as the room size, color, accessibility, and location. Business people, for example, assume significant meaning about desk size, offices with or without windows, and so on. Generally, it is assumed that the most important people in a company occupy the uppermost floor in a building. Artifacts. This is similarly deals with the communicative aspect of apparent objects visible in the room, art, possessions, and so on. In that, this may be personal, indicative of status, and or revealing of lifestyle. In some societies, much meaning is presumed by one's choice of automobile. Artifacts almost always have cultural significance. For example, in many Western countries, pets have great emotional significance among many Arabs. Rugs are prestigious. Olfactics. This is an aspect of nonverbal communication dealing with smells. Though not widely studied from a communication perspective, olfactics might include the use of perfumes and spices. It is associated with proxemics in that the closer people are in communication, the more likely that the smell will be relevant. In some high-contact cultures such as Samoan or Arab, it is customary to get close enough in conversation to smell the other person. Indeed, Arabs and religious Muslims are known for using perfumes. According to the teaching the Prophet, that is a charity to smell nice for others. Synchrony focuses on the amount of coordination in people's behavior when their nonverbal cues are in sync with one another. Some examples including mirroring, mimicry, or behavioral meshing. The uses of nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication provides individuals and groups with many options for presenting their messages. Here are some of the uses of nonverbal communication. To create impressions beyond the verbal element of communication. To repeat and reinforce what is said verbally. To manage and regulate the interaction among participants in the communication exchange. To express emotion beyond the verbal element. To convey relational messages of affection, power, dominance, respect, and so on. To promote honest communication by detecting deception or conveying suspicion. And to provide group or social leadership by sending messages of power and persuasion.